The South was the home of the farming industry in pre-industrial America, with the cash crops being cotton and tobacco. With the use of the cotton gin, invented by Eli Whitney, which was a device that would pick the seeds out of the cotton for you instead of picking the cotton by hand. Cotton became the most grown crop in the South due to this invention. The steel plow was also a very important invention due to the fact that the wooden plows used in England couldn't plow the tough soil in America and would break. Now they had a strong and effective plow that could turn the soil with ease. With the massive cotton and tobacco plantations also came many workers, and the owners wanted to make as much capital as possible. So instead of paying workers every week, they would buy slaves because they were a one time cost and didn't need to treat them well at all. The North in pre industrial times was vastly different from the South in the ways in which they made their living. While the South focused on farming to make money, the North only farmed to stay alive. The northern colonies hunted for raw materials like timber for shipbuilding. The colonies would send all the raw material back to the mother country and in return get machinery to continue work, food, clothes, and whatever they needed to survive. This only favored the mother country because as the colonies were working very hard to provide raw materials to the mother country, they were becoming very rich off of all the resources they were sending, and the colonies didn't get any money in return. The North developed textile factories and used cotton from the southern plantations for their products.
Although many people worked in factories, that does not mean it was a great job. The conditions were very poor. Sometimes the heat inside of the factory was too hot so workers would pass out, and there wasn't a lot of light, so workers easily got hurt. When workers got hurt, they would get sent back to work after it was dealt with, and if it was bad enough that they couldn't go to work, they would be fired. Factories would have houses for the workers, but they would have to obey by the rules of the factory and follow the scheduled times. The houses were normally just in the shadow of the factories, and families could sign a contract to work, but if one person didn't show up, the whole family could get fired. Many workers formed unions, which are groups of people joining together. The unions would fight for what they believed in, like higher wages or less hours. They would even form strikes, but the strikes never got anywhere, and mostly just got people fired. Some strikes had a lot of violence also. Lots of people were injured or killed. Because children worked in factories, there wasn't a lot of education. It was uncommon for a child to go to school. There was just no time. Immigrants started coming to the United States but faced a lot of discrimination because they didn't look or speak like Americans, and they would take the jobs in the factories because nobody wanted them or people got replaced with them while they were on strike. Finally, inventions started coming, like the telephone, the telegraph, and the typewriter, which helped communication and eventually assembly lines that improved factory work. Because inventions needed other businesses to give them materials, other businesses improved, which caused monopolies because businesses would fight for other people to buy their products, and businesses would make other businesses shut down.
But those businesses that people bought soon moved overseas, which goes into the next topic, which is the post-industrial era. The post-industrial era really started in the 1920s. As the booming economy was growing, the demand of products was going down due to the fact that people now had money and had everything they needed. But since the people had what they needed, sales began to go down and goods began to pile up. The stock market could not take it, which then on October 24th, 1929, the stock market crashed, later causing the Great Depression. This left 13 to 15 million Americans unemployed. More people than ever were now poor or homeless. The soup kitchens began to overflow with starving poor people. The slow and painstaking journey to a better economy had started. When President Roosevelt got elected, he immediately took action. A great example of how America rebounded from the Depression was the many administrations that provided permanent jobs for jobless people. The Works Project Administration, WPA, alone employed 8.5 million people from 1935 to 1943. People were now getting jobs and making money. This was causing the economy to grow, and the GDP, gross domestic product, grew at an average rate of 9% per year. Now that the economy was finally in check, companies were looking for new ways to save and make more money. At this time, companies started to realize that they could move their big company overseas in countries such as Vietnam and Ecuador. There, they could pay for cheaper labor. This is because there was not many labor laws there. In the factories, they could have worse working conditions than they would have had in the US, which also allows them to not spend as much money on things such as heating, lighting, and air quality. But this move caused millions of factory jobs to leave the US, leaving past factory workers unemployed. But the jobs that had been taken were quickly replaced with service jobs. This was due to all the new technology and new need for service. Jobs such as firemen, nurses, computer technicians, hairdressers, and many more. The U.S. no longer builds and manufactures nearly as much. They provide a service instead. But as for the immigrants that were also working in the factories, they had a tougher time. But they took the jobs that also provided service. But they did jobs like maids and fast food cooks. They worked these jobs because the Americans did not want them, and those were the only jobs an unskilled worker could get. Now that skilled jobs were on a rise, Americans were now getting a better education. This is because most jobs now required a skilled worker rather than an unskilled worker. With factories gone, Americans now viewed the immigrants different. This is because the Americans now think that the immigrants are taking their jobs. But the immigrants had no idea what to do. This is because they previously had unskilled jobs that required no education or skill. Without the factories, the people in the manufacturing business now find themselves with no clearly defined social role. One effect from the post-industrialism today is the advances in technology. Technology is now making it so you don't have to even go into work. You can just work from home. People are now less interactive with their coworkers and moving further and further away from their workspace. This just goes to show that even still today, in 2016, we are still in the post-industrial era. There is so much that happened in the pre-industrial, the industrial, and the post-industrial eras. Many things were invented, industrialized, and manufactured. All the new technology and ideas like the cotton gin, the assembly line, and overseas factories changed the lives of many Americans and caused a spark of new innovation. We cannot tell every detail from the post-industrial revolution because some things have just not happened yet. And who's to know what the future has in store for the U.S. and the ending to the Industrial Revolution?